Chapter 3. Knowledge is power, whether you want it or not. Lizen, in the meantime, had decided that some study needed to be done in a more civilized setting. Given the sheer number of inhabited worlds in the galaxy, the choices that the Lions had made in their pilots this time were remarkable. She needed information on this unknown planet with its unknown race. Why had they chosen 5 individuals from a single world, and from a people that had not yet emerged on the interstellar stage? What was it about this particular race that interested Voltron's group consciousness so? In truth, the impressions that she'd gotten from the 2 who had visited her were varied and interesting, but by no means conclusive. They were too small a sample, to put it simply. Lizen wondered if she should visit that planet to get a better taste for their character. Hearts and minds, she thought absently as she dug through the main archive of Parzarak Space Hab, which had been the closest site of so large a library. A risk, yes, but a calculated one, and she was fully capable of taking care of herself. Hearts and minds, she muttered aloud, her fingers tapping on the keys. Something that we've lost the knack of looking for the most part. A bit of a mistake, that, and a huge blind spot. That's tyranny for you. It certainly was. It also fed into one of her pet lines of study, one that she didn't often have much opportunity to advance due to lack of source material. The re-emergence of Voltron was a magnificent opportunity in so many ways. Lizen, a harsh voice spoke up behind her. I knew that I would find you here. What have you been up to, girl? Lizen turned and saw a woman who wore heavy robes, her narrow, fine-boned face tattooed with a pair of blood-red streaks below the eyes. The younger woman dipped a little curtsy for tradition's sake, but made no other signs of respect. Haggar had taken an interest in Lizen's family roughly 600 or 700 years ago, and Lizen's mother frankly idolized the woman. Lizen herself had grown up completely without any liking for, or fear of, the ancient witch, a fact that had driven her mother to tears on more than one occasion, and had resulted in numerous scoldings. Haggar herself did not approve of Lizen's willfulness, but had not yet decided to teach her a lesson in humility. The Gurap-Han lineage was too powerful to annoy lightly, even for someone like Haggar, and Haggar had reasons of her own for holding back. That didn't stop Lizen from occasionally pushing the envelope, however. Studying, Haggar, Lizen replied sweetly. It's a thing I like to do now and again. The old witch's eyes narrowed dangerously, an expression that had dampened many a trouser in the past. It did not noticeably shake the younger woman's air of ironic humor. Studying what, exactly? You've been spotted in odd places, and in odd company. Where are those paladins? Lizen sighed. They're wherever they are when they're not on duty, of course. I never saw their ship, Haggar. I was busy. That is not the same as not having seen the pilots, Haggar snapped angrily. The information my druids extracted from that greedy idiot of a soldier is suspect, since any confession acquired under duress cannot be counted on to be accurate. Lizen gave the older witch a hard glare. I've seen what your pets get up to. Any victim of theirs will say anything at all to get them to stop playing with him, and you know it. Did you break down those soldiers for spare parts as well? I hope not. It's a shameful waste of personnel. If it gets you out of my hair sooner, then yes, I did see them. It was too good an opportunity to study them to waste. Study them? Haggar snarled. What line of study could you possibly pursue with those filthy, thieving primitives? Lizen gave her an arch smile. Heroism, Haggar. It's a very interesting field of study. Neither of those 2 boys were anything out of the ordinary until the Lions gathered them up. And yes, I let them go. Haggar hissed, eyes flashing. She came a few steps closer, sparks flaring from her fingertips in her fury. You let them go. How dare you? You betray your emperor and your people by doing so. Lizen sighed. I'm as loyal to him and them as I have ever been. He won't be happy until he's faced them himself, the whole team of them together. Heroes are rare, and he desires the challenge they present to him because they are the best test of his own strength. What greater triumph is there than to defeat a foe that has scattered all others before it? Fool child! The Emperor is a hero! Was one. Lizen stared the ancient witch right in the eye without flinching. Long ago. Now he is the lord and master of all he surveys, and what has it brought him? Power, yes, plenty of that. His smallest deeds are mighty. Fear, certainly. Whole civilizations live in terror of him and tremble at the sound of his name. Respect? Goodness, yes, none will gainsay his decrees. Fame? No one is more widely known than the eternal Emperor, but he hasn't been a hero since he took the throne. Neither have you, I might add, although you played a similar role to your current one during the Sisterhood War. Neither of you have exactly encouraged heroism in either our race or in any of our subject races, so I'm perfectly willing to buck the rules a bit if it gets me a little more data. A dead hero is useless from a scientific standpoint. It's just a pile of meat. You've seen enough of those pass through your lab and into the Charnel pits. Wasted. Haggar's hands blurred through a quick series of gestures, firing a crackling ball of purple-black light that impacted against Lizen's chest. She shrieked and folded up around the blow, slumping to the floor against the information terminal and clutching at her breast. Wasted, were they? Haggar snarled. Nothing of the sort. I learned much from each defeated hero and removed threats to the Empire while I was at it. You think to challenge me one day, do you? I will welcome that day of defiance, girl, and I will learn from your corpse as well. One clawed hand reached down and stroked Lizen's head almost gently. I will make sure to study you very closely indeed. Laughing scornfully, Haggar turned and strode away, confident that Lizen did not have the strength to mount a counterattack. Lizen waited until she was gone, then straightened up, a ball of purple malice clutched in one fist. She examined the sputtering orb critically, and then extinguished it with a breath. Challenge you, godmother? Lizen chuckled and pulled herself to her feet. Not hardly. Not directly, and not without backup. You're still the strongest of us, but you lack finesse, and you've focused too much on one line of research. It'll be ever so much easier to arrange things so that you wind up destroying yourself. Turning back to the terminal's display, she growled under her breath. I'll see you and your Emperor curbed and brought to heel if I have to declare Keshveg against the whole damned Empire.
Later, she returned to her ship in a thoughtful frame of mind. Earth, or what the Empire knew of the place, hinted at a remarkable people, one that was startlingly similar to her own in some ways, while being wildly different in others. They had so much sheer variety. Hundreds of cultures, all of them distinct, and all of them remembering older ancestral ones, and yet all of them very much that of a single race. No wonder the Lions had drawn on just that one planet for pilots. If that race ever got out among the stars in their own right, they would baffle and awe civilizations far older than their entire species. Lizen knew that she would absolutely have to visit that planet, and soon. She needed more data, much more, and before any trigger-happy idiot could stomp in and contaminate it. First, however, she needed an excuse. Needling Haggar might have been enjoyable, but it had been self-indulgent. The old bat would be watching her now, and would interfere if Lizen moved too obviously. Or, of course, Lizen could field test a few Averic mods that she'd been working on. Her fingers tapped the code on the keypad habitually, almost without her conscious direction, and the hatch slid smoothly back to allow her in. Automatically, she keyed the system that checked for surveillance drones. Interestingly, nothing fizzled or exploded. That meant that Haggar had probably planted something on her that wasn't physical. Drat her. Well, Lizen had the cure for that. A more pleasant surprise met her when she entered the big common lounge and found Modri up and about, finishing up the assembly of a portable scanner. "Ah, my lady," he greeted her with an eager smile. "See, I've finished it." She came over and tried the controls, which worked perfectly. He'd made real progress. "Very good. Well done. Your dexterity's just about back to normal, isn't it?" "Almost," he admitted, rubbing at his fingers. "I had some trouble with my left hand until I worked the stiffness out, and my shoulders ache. But I can walk without the cane now." She rubbed his back, feeling the knobs and beams of his spine and ribs. It would be a long time before he built up enough muscle to cover those bones properly again, but he was a willing patient and would do his best. More importantly, he was in full control of his own mind now. "Care to show me? You need to present yourself to the dragons one more time, and so do I." Modri groaned. He knew what it meant if the big reptiloids disapproved of him again, but he looked up at her in concern that she might not be acceptable either. "What happened?" "Haggar showed up while I was in the library, and we had a little talk," Lizen snorted. "Impossible creature. She equates fear with respect, and doesn't like it when people won't give her either. Oh, she showed me her displeasure all right. I blocked that, but I had to let her pat me on the head." He grimaced and pushed himself to his feet with a grunt. "I'll bring the first aid kit." They went slowly. Modri was much surer on his feet than he had been, but he couldn't move very fast. He'd healed well from the grafting procedures, but he would need more practice in balancing on his new legs before he could think about speed. Still, he refused to prop himself up on her shoulder, placing his feet carefully and concentrating on maintaining a smooth stride. Fortunately, it wasn't a long walk to the lift shaft, and he kept his balance well when it lowered them to the recreational deck. Lizen smiled to see that the environmental systems had transformed the huge open area into a nice little slice of Zampidri prairie. She hadn't brought the 2 dragons along for her own amusement. Oh, no. They'd insisted on coming, seeking excitement and adventure in the stars beyond their home sky. Since their many talents included being able to detect and pinpoint bad magic, she'd been happy to have them along. A large stone bench near the door allowed Modri some rest. The short walk had left him sweating with the effort, and she could tell that his muscles were aching. Soluk and Tilla appeared out of the tall grasses like ghosts, and Lizen made a mental note to find out just how they could walk so quietly on their big, clawed feet. They seemed pleased to see Modri again, at least. "Your opinion is needed again, my friends," she murmured. "And check me, too, please." Soluk did the honors for Modri, whiffling him all over while the man sat very still on the bench. The dragons made him a little nervous, and Lizen couldn't blame him. Every other time he'd done this, he'd had to have something pulled very painfully out of his body. Thankfully, this time Soluk vented his delicate little sneeze and high-pitched giggle. Modri smiled in relief and rubbed Soluk's nose. "Clean, at last." "Good. Haggar will never control you again," Lizen said, just as relieved as he was. "My turn. If you would, Tilla." Tilla repeated the process, sniffing with great energy at the top of Lizen's head before venting a vicious hiss. "Damn," Lizen said, sitting down next to Modri. "This is going to hurt. Disinfectant at the ready, please, and a painkiller." Modri popped open the kit and laid out the appropriate medications. Lizen began to chant quietly under her breath, the odd syllables hanging almost visibly in the air before a fat purple spark erupted from her scalp with a crack and a whiff of scorched hair. "Ouch! Tajvek, that old crone!" Modri smiled and applied the disinfectant, handing her a pill between wipes. "That's not physically possible, you know." Lizen growled, reaching up to run her fingers over the scorch mark on her scalp and coming away with tufts of charred fur. "I'll hex her with 3 soul pesks, and then Tajvek will not only be possible, but inevitable. Thank you, Modri. Was that all of them, Tilla?" This time the sniffing over resulted in a sneeze and a giggle. "Just the one," Lizen said. "She was trying to scare me. That would have caused all sorts of bad dreams, and eventually hallucinations. easily enough broken, but she had to have it prepared beforehand. I worry her, I think.
As well you should,
Mortri replied easily, applying a coat of quick heal to the burn.
You are plotting her downfall, after all.
Lizen chuckled wickedly. Damn straight, and she knows it. She just can't pinpoint how I'm going about it. To be fair, I'm not sure either. As good as I am at etheric sciences, scrying is not one of my strong points. Ha! To be fair, nobody can see the future with any clarity right now. Voltron's reactivation has muddled everything up. He sighed.
I'm very glad that I won't have to fight that thing.
Oh, your oath?
Mortri thumped a fist on the bench. No. I gave my oath to the Emperor when I entered training. I gave it again when I completed it, and again when I was given command of my ship. For honoring my oath, I was cast down by the Emperor himself and nearly destroyed. He has no claim on me now. Instead, I offer it to you. You alone, you who are willing to expend so much effort on a shattered and half-mad lab reject. She lifted a hand and stroked his face, running her fingers through the long fur around his ear. I accept, of course. I promise to do my best not to get you killed. That's more than Zarkon promised me, Mortri muttered quietly, leaning into that caress. He might have continued in that vein, but something in Lizen's pocket chimed. What? That was fast, Lizen said, taking a small, very high-end communicator out of her pocket. Mortri stared curiously at the device. She'd told him about that unusual visit, and listened in fascinated silence when she pressed the accept button. I'm here, she said pleasantly. Greetings, and is all well? Could be better, could be worse. Shiro's voice came clearly through the speaker, although there was no image. These particular devices were audio only. Alora's not happy, but she accepts that we can't do anything about her people's situation right now. She's not too sure about you, either. That's only to be expected, Lizen said calmly. Considering what happened between her people and ours all those years ago, I would be very surprised if she wasn't suspicious. I'm gonna have to get the whole story of that at some point, Shiro muttered. Would you mind doing us a favor? If it's within my power. Your little visit has come to the attention of certain people, and I need to move carefully for a little while. Sorry about that. When we were recruited, I suppose you could say, it was a little sudden. Some of us have family back home who are doubtless worrying about us. We don't dare contact them from here in case the Galra intercepted, so we've recorded our messages on data chips, and included a translated manual for the reader. Koran tends to forget that we can't read Altaean. And you need a courier. Yes, do you know where our world is? I found it in the archives. It's a nice place, isn't it? Where exactly should I receive the message packet, and where should I deliver it? There was a faint sigh of relief from the communicator. We'll leave a note in the packet with the address. I'll let you use your own judgment in how best to make the delivery. Historically, our governments have put a lot of effort into convincing the public that aliens don't exist. I think that it's about time that they were proven wrong, especially since we're on the Emperor's shortlist for invasion. As for the pickup point, are you familiar with... Drat. Paige, what are those coordinates again? Thanks. Zor-669-22-7.38? Panapoor's Rock, Lizen said. Largely considered to be the most boring spot in civilized space. Nice choice. What's the time frame? 18 to 24 standard Altaean hours. Wait another 6 or 7 hours after that to pick it up so that we can get clear of the area. Very good. I may wait a little longer than that, since I'm at a considerable distance from there. That's just as well. Oh, and Hunk says hello and thanks for the recipe for those buns. Oh, everyone says thanks for the recipe. They're welcome, Lizen said with a smile. They certainly are, and believe me. Incidentally, how is Modri doing? He's up and about now, and well on his way to recovery. Tilla and Soluk send their love, by the way. Tilla chirped agreeably, and there was a brief laugh from the other side. They're good dragons. Tell Modri that I'm sorry for busting him up. Right, I've got to go if we're going to get that packet set out for you. Talk to you later. Good luck, paladins, Lizen said, and cut the connection. The two Galra sat there in thoughtful silence for a few minutes. Modri rubbed absently at his left arm, where not so long ago a mechanical claw had been cracked from hinge to elbow by a well-placed strike from a battle arm. He cares, the recovering warrior muttered wonderingly. They do. It's both a glaring weakness and a source of unbelievable strength, Lizen smiled as she put the communicator away. Neither Zarkon nor Haggar will be able to understand that. Or Sendak, Motri said with a sly look at Lizen. Perhaps we'll get lucky and they'll get that maniac out of your hair for good. Lizen made a rude noise. She had no love for the Emperor's favorite henchman, and for very good reasons. She hadn't been at all sorry to hear that his ship had been lost on a mission out to one of the fringe worlds, although it didn't surprise her that the survivors of whatever had smashed the heavy cruiser had recovered him alive shortly afterward in a neighboring star system. Injured, his battle arm ruined, and trapped in a damaged stasis pod, but alive. If I had the luck of 3 planets, my friend, it wouldn't be enough to get that creature off of my trail. I may have to turn parts of him into something nasty at some point. Modri shook his head. Haggar's beaten you to that. Truth. Let's get to the bridge. I'll plot our course if you run checks on the shuttles. We've an errand to run. Modri gave her a wry smile and heaved himself carefully to his feet. Lurch, I can't run yet. Do you think that they'll send a probe to watch us? Lizen's teeth flashed in a grin as she wrapped an arm around his waist, partly in affection and partly to steady him. Of course. I'd be disappointed in them if they didn't. A couple of days later, Shiro was lurking in one of the craters of a large asteroid, watching as a large ship that looked like a cluster of blue eggs approached Panapoor's rock. The rock itself wasn't much to look at, being an irregular lump of stone roughly 4 or 5 miles across, but it was the biggest thing out here. Other than that, there was nothing interesting about this tiny, out-of-the-way solar system at all. Its sun was a minuscule, cool cinder of a red dwarf, and clouds of dust and small asteroids obscured the view of the stars. There was just enough cover out here to conceal the castle, but that was the end of its utility. Even from here he could see the tiny green beacon light that Pidge had rigged onto their packet. The egg cluster ship slipped out of sight behind one of the dust clouds and vanished. A few minutes later, a small egg-shaped pod jetted over and landed gently on the rock, disgorging a single suited figure who retrieved the message packet and departed promptly back the way it had come. She's got it, Shira said quietly into his helmet comm.
So we see, Karan's voice replied in a conspiratorial whisper. Long-range probe's locked onto her ship and is ready to go. Think she'll read our mail?
I don't know, Shiro said, squinting at the dust cloud as the big ship behind it began to move. So long as it gets back to Earth, does it matter? I'm more worried that she might alter the recordings.
Not a chance of that, Karan said cheerfully. That was a permanent message recorder. Nothing short of hitting it with a laser axe will erase or alter anything recorded on it. Launching the probe now.
Shiro looked up and saw the faint glint of the probe among the tumbling asteroids, only visible because he knew it would be there. As he watched, it changed its course to follow Lizen's ship at a healthy distance and vanished into hyperspace along with it. Shiro sighed and headed back to his lion, which had been tucked into another crater nearby. He wondered, as he settled back into the pilot's seat, whether or not it was wise to trust that woman, and what sort of ally she might turn out to be. Hunk liked her, and that was a point in her favor, for Hunk was rarely wrong in his judgments. Karan's assertions that the dragons wouldn't tolerate unsavory characters was another. On the other hand, she was Galra and possibly a clever enemy. On the third hand, and technically he did have 3 now, not one thing she had told them had been anything less than the truth. Hopefully the probe would tell them more. Keith met him by the hangar door when he dismounted a little time later, offering him a beverage packet that he took with a nod of thanks. The air that the suit provided him with was good, but dry, and he drank deeply. Probe working okay? He asked. Keith shrugged. We won't be sure until it comes out of hyperdrive. The fact that it works at all after 10,000 years is pretty impressive. Pidge and Hunk are having a look at the others right now. Curran says that it'll be a while before it gets to Earth in any case. We really are in a galaxy far, far away. Shiro puffed a laugh and began to remove his armor, Keith moving to help him with the tricky catches under the backplates. And the Empire's even bigger and more evil in real life than in the movies. I get the feeling that we arrived rather late in the game. Got that right, Keith said, helping him arrange the armor on the mechanism that would clean, recharge, and take it to its ready station. I'm heading up to the bridge. I want to be there when the probe comes out. Shiro heard the homesickness in the boy's voice. Feeling much the same way, he draped a comforting arm around Keith's shoulders. Sounds like a good idea. Mind if I keep you company? Happy to have it. They arrived on the bridge to find Curran and Allura there, discussing something in low voices while Lance dozed in one of the defense drone stations. Pidge and Hunk arrived a few minutes later, talking technology.
Pretty sure it was that loose green thingy, Hunk was saying. But it could have been all that fuzzy stuff in that part that looked like an egg beater. Were you able to figure out the manual?
A little, Pidge said with a scowl. It's a good thing that whoever wrote it included really good diagrams. Altean is a tricky language, and I'm pretty sure that they use sound forms that we don't. One of these days, I'm going to have to hunt up the Universal Translator program and find out what makes it tick. Hunk nodded. Yeah, weird, isn't it? How they've got one for spoken words, but not for written ones? I'm gonna have to see if I can... Oh, hey Shiro, everything go okay? It went fine, Shiro replied. The packet was picked up just as we'd arranged. We're just waiting for them to get there. Did you find out what was wrong with the other probes? Hunk shrugged. Age. Even when stuff is packed properly, it still ages off. Things come loose under their own weight. Little bits of dust and loose microorganisms evolve into something that likes that environment, and some materials go brittle and crack. Pidge spread her arms out and indicated the entire ship. I'm surprised that anything on this ship still works at all. How long is an Altean year when compared to an Earth year anyway? I'm not the one to ask, Shiro said, gazing up at the blank screens above the console. Eventually, Curran spoke up.
They're almost there. Re-entry into normal space in 3, 2, 1, there. Now then, does that look familiar? Nice looking place. Lovely rings your planet's got.
Lance awoke with a snort and squinted at the screen. What are you talking about? That's Saturn. Humanity couldn't live there if it tried. Some of the moons are pretty cool, though. Curran fiddled with the controls.
Yes, looks like they arrived a goodly ways out. Oh, now that's a nice gas giant. Look at those stripes.
Jupiter, Keith said. Uninhabitable, but I think that there were talks about setting up a research station on Ganymede or Europa. Hey, there it is. I wonder how they wrangled the funding for it.
I'm sure they thought of something, Curran said cheerfully. If nothing else, catching the treasurer in a headlock and twisting his ear always worked for Alfor. All right, you've got a nice thick asteroid belt there. Plenty of iridium. Ever think of mining that?
Shiro waved a dismissive hand. Earth's governments have been arguing about it for years. So far, we've been concentrating on the rocks that come too close to home for comfort, and that's enough for now.
I suppose, Curran said dubiously. And that would be the place, right? A little small, I should say, unless you're a subterranean bunch.
That's Mars. We've got a station there, but that's it, Pidge said with a grin. It really upset some people to find out that the only organisms living there were anaerobic bacteria. Humans had been hoping that someone was living up there for hundreds of years, and some people are still sure that there's a secret civilization of Martians somewhere on the planet.
I hope not,
Curran said absently, making a few adjustments to the controls. When we Alteans were first exploring our solar system, we found 2. The space mice, who we got along with very well, and another bunch on the next planet out that thought we were tasty. After the first few diplomatic missions wound up as brunch, we left that planet alone. Mars looks a bit harsh to spawn anything friendly.
Now that looks more like it.
There was a soft sigh of pleasure from the paladins at the sight of the blue world shining like a jewel in the screens, and Allura glanced around at their fond, yearning expressions. She could not help but feel envious of them, for her own beloved homeworld was gone, destroyed, and lost forever. How she envied them for that simple sphere of a world. That's Earth, Hunk said, homesickness naked in his voice. I wish that we were there.
Hey, you can see the Great Wall of China from here.
Allura peered at the thin, pale line that snaked its way across a healthy stretch of one continent. That's a very large wall. What was it for? A bunch of things, Lance said, leaning back in his seat. Keeping the Mongols out, keeping the Chinese in, getting rid of people that the Emperor of China didn't like, guarding the Silk Road. These days it's used as a tourist trap. Believe it or not, it was built before anyone had invented a working steam engine. Every brick was laid by hand. That's a lot of bricks, Allura observed. Lizen's ship, which had been visible as a rounded blue shadow in one corner of the screen, surged ahead at that point, heading for the other side of the globe. The probe followed, then came to a halt when the egg cluster ship found itself a parking orbit above the Pacific Ocean. It then proceeded to do nothing at all for some time. "What's she doing?" Keith asked.
"Not sure," Karan replied, fiddling with the controls again. "Could be that she's taking scans or accessing the local news nets. She might just be letting your own astronomers get a good look at her. Fair's fair, after all. Haven't your lot met any other people yet?"
"No," Shiro said grimly. "As far as most of humanity is concerned, we're the only intelligent people out there. Well, except for those who believe that we're being visited regularly by bald gray or green aliens with big black eyes. No formal contacts yet, though."
Karan hummed thoughtfully. "Sounds like the Aberromans to me. Like to make pretty patterns in grain fields, do they? Or do nasty things to large domestic animals?"
Startled, the paladins could only nod. "Yeah," Lance said. "An urban legend has them doing some weird things with anal probes?"
"Yeah, that's them. Their juveniles can be a terrible nuisance to the locals, and they can't go anywhere without setting up clandestine trading posts."
Karan sighed nostalgically.
"They used to drive the Trade Commission, the Customs Department, the Non-Sentient Life Form Protection Agency, and the Interstellar Decency Organization absolutely mad. And the adults wouldn't do a thing to help or hinder them. Or anyone else, for that matter. Nice to know they're still around."
"Says you," Hunk said, sounding a bit annoyed. "One of my friends had a cousin who got visited by one of those guys,
only he wasn't very good at it. I'm told that she watched from the roof of her place while he arranged her llamas into circles, mutilated her alfalfa patch, and practiced punitive proctology on her garden gnome. She was upset about the gnome. It was a present from her sister, and now she can't look at it without laughing."
Karan waved a hand airily.
"He couldn't help it if he was dyslexic. Hold on, I need to make some adjustments. This is a cluttered sort of orbit, isn't it?"
Indeed it was. Bits had been falling off of spacecraft since the first few attempts at space exploration, and nobody had ever gotten around to cleaning things up. As they watched, a tumbling, awkward mass of oddly shaped metal came barreling into view and bounced off of the egg cluster ship's shields. Unfortunately, the object ricocheted straight into the probe. There was a burst of static, a whirl of colors, and then the screen went blank.
Pidge winced. "Wow. I hope that nobody's going to miss that military satellite. Crud. None of the other probes are working. What are we going to do now?"
"Hope," Shiro said. Director Dawkins hated reporters. He hated their barking voices, their gimlet stares, their loaded questions, and their addiction to salacious detail. Most of all, he hated the disruption in his routine when he was forced by his superiors to hold press conferences. It wasn't good for his blood pressure or the Galaxy Garrison Academy, having them sniffing around like the weasels they were, and they just wouldn't let up. It had been bad enough when those 3 researchers had vanished up by Pluto. That had finally died down despite the nagging of the conspiracy theorists. It had flared up again worse than ever when one of them had returned, however briefly, in a ship of no earthly make. He'd seen the wreck himself before the higher-ups had vanished it, and hadn't liked the look of it at all. Recordings of that big blue robot cat had somehow gotten out all over the internet, and Dawkins had long ago resolved to throttle the idiot who'd leaked it if he ever found out who it had been. And the subsequent disappearance of 3 of the Academy's students had not gone over well. 3 large families and the widow and mother of the vanished Pluto-bound scientist and his son were raising hell about that, and weren't likely to be satisfied with official condolences. Right now, he was standing behind a podium in one of the training fields, staring at a sea of waving microphones and cameras, and heartily wishing the whole lot of them on the far side of the moon. A particularly vulpine individual was nagging at him yet again over the possibility of alien abductions, which was far too close to the truth for Dawkins's comfort. There had been a lot of odd sightings recently, and not all of them had been possible to cover up. He looked at all of the eager, predatory muckrakers that were staring at him like a pack of hungry dogs stared at a fresh roll of sausages, and took refuge in official protocol. "The investigations are ongoing," he stated in as firm a voice as he could. "There is no evidence that the missing students were abducted by aliens, or that the loss of the Kerberos mission was anything other than pilot error. There is no evidence that space aliens exist at all. There is no proof that the videos of strange craft or giant robots are anything other than a hoax. There is no—" A gust of wind from above cut his denials off short, and the sun was abruptly blocked out by an enormous object that had appeared as if by magic in the sky. Over 100 people gazed upward in astonishment at what was unmistakably an alien craft. As one, 100 vidcorders lifted to take images as sunlight glinted off of the sleek blue contours, and a voice boomed out over the field that could have been heard for miles. "Citizens of Earth," it began in a woman's voice. "That was the biggest pile of complete untruths that I've heard in years. There are well over 5,000 other civilizations in this galactic sector alone, and the largest and most aggressive of them has been studying yours for some time. Those 3 researchers were indeed kidnapped. So were those students, but by a different agency. They are currently building a resistance effort to combat the forces of an empire that would very much like to enslave and exploit your world, and attempting to keep this information from the general public is not only stupid, but it's rude. I have been asked to deliver messages from 5 of the abductees and their hosts. Stand by for delivery." A small hatch opened on the underside of the ship, and a box about the size of a board game descended slowly in a beam of shimmering golden light. Dawkins caught it awkwardly. It was heavier than it looked. "The messages include a full report from Takashi Shirogane, official greetings from the Royal House of Altea, and personal recordings for the families of the students. Kindly let the families see those first before you make them public. Your world is in danger, humans, and it would be to your benefit to make a collective effort to address the problem now, rather than to lie to the people and blame each other later. A lot of other races have attempted to conceal the threat from their people. They are all now subject to the Galra Empire, or are dead. Be warned." With that, the strange ship lifted up and away, vanishing into the clouds and leaving Dawkins feeling like he was holding a live nuke in his hands. From the expressions on the reporters' faces, he might as well have been.